Well, the Brewers are here to stay for the foreseeable future, and that is a good thing for all of us. We'll talk about that coming up next here on this edition of Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Brewers almost left once in my lifetime, and that was back in the mid-'90s. Scary, scary close to leaving. And we should never take it for granted that we have a professional sports franchise in our city, whether it be the Brewers, the Bucks, the Packers in Green Bay, no matter who it is, never take them for granted. We almost did at one point in the 90s, and now we find out the Brewers are going to be staying here at least through 2050. How you doing, everybody? Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. This episode brought to you by the college football playoffs. The playoffs are here this weekend. Friday, 1 game. Saturday, 3 games. You don't want to miss a moment of the action. I know I won't. The college football playoffs presented by Allstate, beginning with 4 first-round games December 20th and the 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. Longtime sportscaster here in the state of Wisconsin, proud host of Locked On Brewers. Happy holidays to everybody out there. Merry Christmas coming up next week. And of course, we are going to have shows coming up next week. Somebody said, are you going to have shows during the holidays? Yes, we certainly will. And I'm celebrating right now because I'm so happy that the Brewers are staying. I never take for granted, like I said at the top, that the Milwaukee Brewers are going to stay here forever. Like to think so. We got a nice ballpark for them, AmFam Field. But let's go back to 1995 when the Brewers were also close to moving. They were 1 vote away. In fact, they were about ready to go. If we did not get this new stadium, if the bill had not been passed in the mid-90s for this stadium, this team was headed to likely Charlotte, North Carolina. But we got a politician to flip his vote, and by 1 vote, it passed, and the Brewers stayed here. There were a lot of people who didn't want the dome on top of the ballpark. There were people who thought the Brewers at the time in the mid-'90s were drawing 5,000, 6,000 fans for a game, 10,000. Whatever they announced was a lie because it was well below it. You could have any seat you wanted at County Stadium, and baseball in the mid-'90s looked to be dead. Had we done Locked On Brewers in the mid-'90s, we'd probably have 4 viewers. The interest, I did sports talk in Milwaukee, was very low. And all we talked about the stadium. And I remember doing sports talk down in Milwaukee, and many people just said, the Brewers need to move on. We're going to build this new stadium for them, and it's going to be a waste of time. It's going to be an empty space. We're going to drive by this on 94 and look at that thing, and it's going to be an empty ballpark. And it's like, what do we do? Build this ballpark because no fans are going to come. Well, what happened? The bill passed, and we moved in this new ballpark in the early 2000s. And yeah, second year, third year into it, had one of the worst teams in Brewers history. Lost over 100 games, and it looked like the Brewers were rudderless. Sealy ended up selling the team to Mark Attanasio, and you began to see some progression with the team. About 2004, and then 2005, you kind of got a little flavor of it. And then they start getting in races. In 2008, they made it to the postseason for the first time, and you'd go to games on a Friday or a Saturday night, and it wouldn't be a given that you'd have a nice seat because on a Sunday afternoon, they'd get 41,000 for a game, or a Saturday night game against the Pirates, and that wasn't happening before. And Brewer fever had come back. Now, there were a time, and even in the 80s, I remember when Paul Molitor's 39-game hitting streak ended. There were 12,000 people at the game, August of 87, when Molitor's hitting streak came to an end. But baseball, I don't want to say it was making a comeback here, but it was more popular than ever. Fans were going to games. You had the roof. You could go to a game in April and May and not freeze your rear end off. And things were good. Things were really good with the Milwaukee Brewers, and baseball was here to stay in Milwaukee. We loved it, and at least me, I was not taking it for granted that the Brewers were going to stay here. And so what the Brewers have done now, that financing package got pushed through, and the governor signed it last year, $500 million in public aid. That pretty much assured that the Brewers were going to stay there. And then now just yesterday, they signed the lease. They agreed to a lease. They agreed to the lease. I don't know if they officially signed it, but they've agreed through 2050 to stay in Milwaukee. And that's a great thing. Yeah, we get frustrated when the Brewers don't get by the first round of the playoffs. We get frustrated that they can't spend money. All that. But the bottom line is the Brewers are one of the better teams in the National League, even though the financial situation in Major League Baseball is totally bad. It works against the Brewers, but still here they are in first place in the division. Going to games on a Friday night or a Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon is a tradition here in the state of Wisconsin. We love it. And, even the casual Brewer fan loves going to games. When the Packers are playing on a Sunday afternoon, you will still get 38,000 out at AmFam on a random Sunday afternoon. You will. You get more people talking about the Hot Stove League on a Sunday. And there's a general terrific interest, especially in the last couple of years with the Milwaukee Brewers, because the last 2 years they've won division titles. People are excited about the offseason. People are excited about 2025. Is Rhys Hoskins going to come back? What are the Brewers going to do at third base? How's Woodruff going to be next year? Is he going to make the rotation? Is he going to be healthy? Should the Brewers get all these questions? What are they going to do about the crowded outfield? These are questions that people have in mind. Now, let's face it, this state will always be a football state, and Milwaukee will always be a football town, even though Green Bay is 2 hours up the road. But baseball is still a thing that people love to do. Go to games, going to games. Fans love to do it. They love the tailgate. They love to go to games. They like following the Milwaukee Brewers on a daily basis. So never take for granted, like I said at the top, that our professional sports teams are going to stay whatever city we live in. And the Brewers are staying through 2050. And the public has stepped up. Well, the public will be stepping up again. And there's going to be certain taxes and all that. But again, if we don't do this, the team will leave. The lease expired in 2030. So we'd have a couple more years of the Brewers, and they could, and trust me, if we didn't pay up for the Milwaukee Brewers, there are other cities that would have. Just like in 1996, other cities would have ponied up for the Milwaukee Brewers. And the same thing here. But Mark Attanasio made a commitment. Bud Selig might not have been the greatest guy as far as, I should say, best businessman when it came to dealing with, contracts with this team. There was something, he didn't have a lot of money compared to some of those, the owners in today's baseball, or even back then. And as salaries continue to grow out of hand, the more outdated Bud Selig seemed for today's baseball. Again, he eventually sold the team, and now here we are with Mark Attanasio. And yeah, we still like to see him spend a little bit more money. But we got a team that's competitive, and not only competitive, I still feel competing for championships, competing for division championships, and is right now the team to beat in the National League Central. But the Brewers are here through 2050. Maybe somewhere down the line, we might be thinking about a new ballpark. You know how things change. But the Brewers do have a lease for this ballpark through 2050. And somewhere down the road, again, they're going to put $500 million to rehab this place. It's still in pretty good condition, but some of the bones got to be replaced. They're going to put heating in there. And what the Brewers have to do is they, in the offseason, have to get people into that ballpark to make some revenue. That's a problem. Get concerts in there, conventions, get whatever. Don't let that thing stay dark for 8 months, which the Brewers tend to do. keeping that thing dark. Let's get concerts in there. They already do a nice job getting concerts there in April and May and throughout the summer, which is fantastic. These country concerts, Billy Joel's coming there in April, I believe it is. Keep those things covering, but let's occupy that thing in the wintertime so revenue is coming in. Revenue to play with, obviously. Revenue for this team to help make this team keep it competitive. But signing the new lease, agreeing to a new lease through 2050, it's a great thing for all of us. It's a great thing for all of us that the Milwaukee Brewers are staying here. We come back. Devin Williams had his press conference with the New York Yankees, and he said he was never given an opportunity to stay in Milwaukee. We'll get to that coming up next here on Locked On Brewers. Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Took the headset off there. If you're watching me on YouTube, I was just monitoring the audio. I had a little audio issue of just making sure that we didn't have any audio glitches. So far, so good. Take the headset off and continue on here on Locked On Brewers and SelectQuote. Life insurance, huge. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in the top level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork is the name of the game at SelectQuote. They are working for you, getting you the best possible rate. I tell my oldest kid all the time, who's in the workforce now after graduating college, Casey, you got to have life insurance. Life insurance. I know you're in your 20s, but you need life insurance. You always need life insurance. It's an important thing I think people miss out on. And SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers, nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers, $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Get the right life insurance for you for less. SelectQuote.com/lockedon. They're going to help you out. They got a rich history in helping people get the right insurance for them. Go to SelectQuote.com/lockedon today to get started. SelectQuote.com/lockedon today. If you're in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. Check into SelectQuote.com/lockedon and see what your options are with SelectQuote. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Good to have you along and follow me along wherever you listen to the podcast, where it's on Google, Spotify, Apple, wherever you download audio podcasts. We are on all those platforms. We're the number one Brewers podcast on the internet because you great Brewer fans out there. Was over at in Oshkosh. Nico Gyros last night, or Nico Gyros, one of many great Euro places in the state of Wisconsin. That's one a favorite of mine. Stopped in yesterday. Guy had a Brewer band around the wall. He was watching the Bucks game behind the counter there, and I said, "Big Brewers fan?" And he looked at me, said, "Yep, I just listened to your podcast." Awesome. I'm a listener to Locked On Brewers at Nico Gyros. Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Got a lot of great listeners out there running you guys every day, following us along podcast. And, of course, if you download the audio version on those platforms, please go to Locked On Brewers on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Once you pull it up, go to Locked On Brewers on YouTube on the search. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. Devin Williams, traded to the Yankees last Friday, held a press conference with the New York media, said he was never given an opportunity to stay with the Brewers. There was never an option with him. The Brewers never came to him and made it an option. We'd love to keep you. Never was an option. And he knew it by seeing the writing on the wall with past pitchers with the Brewers. Corbin Burns, Josh Hader, guys who've been traded. So as we know with the Milwaukee Brewers, if you're a position player and you have success through the organization and you're at the end of your 6 years of control, a position player, you have a shot. You have a shot at staying with the Brewers. If you're a pitcher, we're not paying for pitching. You're going to get traded or we're going to lose you to free agency. And Devin Williams falls in that line. And he said, yep, he was never given an opportunity. And that's not surprising. Not surprising. I think he didn't say this. I think Devin had a little chip on his shoulder. Didn't quite like the way that I had heard that he did not quite like the way things were handled with his back early on last year. Maybe misdiagnosed. Any way you look at it, and then he had to go on the disabled list. So Devin probably had a little chip on his shoulder, and he didn't say whether or not he would have stayed with the Brewers or not, or wanted to stay with the Brewers, or wanted to have a long-term contract. He did say, though, that he was open to having a long-term contract extension with the New York Yankees, and why wouldn't you? I mean, if you're the Dodgers or the Yankees, and you're a player playing for either one of those teams, and you have a shot at getting to the World Series and winning a championship every year, why wouldn't you want to sign a long-term extension with the Yankees? So he's going to go in there. There was an opening for a closer, and we'll see if he's there for the foreseeable future. Now, he also said he thought the Brewers were going to trade him to the Dodgers. He said all along he heard that the Dodgers were the team that he was going to get traded to. It was the Dodgers, and the Dodgers. And then the Yankees snuck in and made the Brewers a better offer. So he was not going to the Dodgers. So he was a little surprised. The Yankees were a contender, but the Dodgers were the front runner, according to him. And he said he wants to sign an extension. Good for him. Yankee bound. The Brewers will see him on opening day. The Brewers open up a series. Like last year, the Brewers opened up in New York against the Mets. This year in March, they open up against the Yankees on the road. So they'll see probably Devin Williams in that series if the Yankees have a lead in the ninth inning. But yeah, good for you. And Devin wrote a nice goodbye letter, as Willie Adames did, a nice goodbye note to the Brewers, thanking the Brewers and how special it was. And why not? It was a special time for him to play here. The fans were great to him. The organization was great to him. Okay. The locker room, there was no drama on this team. It is a great place to play. Playing for the Milwaukee Brewers, you have a terrific manager. Milwaukee, no matter what the national pundits say, is a terrific place to live. With state of Wisconsin, I've lived here all my life. It's a great place. And players who come here have a bad vision of what Milwaukee is like in Wisconsin. Like we have snow 12 months a year when it's only like 10 months a year. 7 months a year, okay? So they have a bad vision and realize when they get here, God, what a beautiful town. Beautiful weather, festivals, everything in Milwaukee, the lakefront. So, again, people at first might be reluctant to come to Milwaukee, but after Milwaukee, ask CC Sabathia and others who have spent little time here after spending time in other cities, how much they liked being in Milwaukee. So we're going to miss Devin just as much as he is going to miss us. But as we know, trading him was a necessary evil for the Milwaukee Brewers. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with some notes here. Chris Carter in the news. Bryce Wilson goes to the White Sox. And the Brewers hire themselves a pitching coach. All that and more coming up next here on Locked On Brewers. FanDuel, this time of the year, man, there's sports going on all day and all night. There's afternoon college bowl games. There's afternoon college basketball tournaments. You have it. The next 2 weeks are a bettor's dream because everything is on the table. And right now, FanDuel, new customers, you bet $5, you bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. You got to win that $5 bet, and then they put $150 into your account. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL, all in one place. So you're watching a game on TV, you see a game you like, well, you go to the FanDuel app, and it's going to be a little ahead than it was on your TV. The play-by-play is all going to be there. You're going to get the latest stats and everything. So you're on the same page where you place your bets when you go live betting in the NFL on FanDuel. But visit FanDuel.com today to join, and you'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets. When you win your first $5 bet, win the bet, they'll put $150 into your account. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And I'm Chuck Freeman, Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. By the way, I want to address something. Somebody put some comments on my YouTube page, and you're free to put them on. You guys have great things to say. And my last podcast I talked about is Rhys Hoskins holding the Brewers down by accepting that $18 million a year deal. I talked about this topic about a year ago. It's not being negative. Some of you came in to say, well, you're being negative about the Milwaukee Brewers. You want me to be objective about the team and what the team is thinking. I cover the Brewers. I'm a media member. I'm just telling you what my perception and my opinion from covering this team all these years. Yeah, they didn't want the Brewers. They didn't want Rhys Hoskins to pick up that $18 million. I don't know if you want me to be all sunshine and balloons out here and never give you a story that's going to cause some controversy, or you never want to talk about the Brewers objectively. But yeah, the bottom line is the Brewers, they do have some work to do. And when somebody says all you do is talk negative about the Brewers, didn't I pick the Brewers to go far in the playoffs? And it was you Brewer fans, not all, who said pump the brakes. Pump the brakes, Chuck. Don't be all in. Don't be so far all in on these Brewers. As it turns out, you guys were right because the Brewers got beat in the first round again. But this guy was all in on the Brewers last year. And each and every show, I was talking about how great the Brewers were. 93 wins, doing everything right. So those of you who think I'm negative, go back and listen to those episodes this past summer. A lot of them. Okay? And I'm going to tell you like it is. If there's something not going right with the Brewers, just like you do, when you're talking Brewers baseball with your buddy, okay, and there's something that you don't like, okay, you're objective to him, and I'm going to be objective and upfront and call it like I see it with the Milwaukee Brewers. Bryce Wilson, who the Brewers did not want, signs a one-year deal with the White Sox, about $1 million. Sounds like he's going to compete for a spot in the starting rotation, and who wouldn't with the White Sox? So Bryce Wilson, we liked him when he was here. I was a little surprised he wasn't coming back, but after talking to some people, I understand it. The Brewers got the most out of Bryce Wilson that they felt they got. Even made some terrific starts last year. Now he's going to Milwaukee, or he's going to Chicago after 2 successful years, I want to say, in Milwaukee. Chris Carter's birthday came up on Twitter today. 38th birthday. Do we remember the Chris Carter year? Led the league in home runs, 41 home runs in 2016. Led the league in games played with 160. 2016, his 1 year here, 38 home runs. We had that first base spot figured out for 1 year, though. But then he bat like 187 or 199, struck out a lot. That's why Chris Carter was no longer in the league. It was bouncing around. He could hit the home run ball, but he struck out a heck of a lot. Way a lot. But he played in 160 games. Chris Carter, happy 38th. And when he left Milwaukee, made a few other stops, but never equaled the 41 homers he had in his career year in 2016. Julio Bourbon is the new first base coach of the Milwaukee Brewers, comes here after spending a few years in player development with the Minnesota Twins, has been with a few other organizations as well. Base running, outfield, bunting. That'll be his other specialties other than manning first base for the Milwaukee Brewers. So Julio Bourbon, the Brewers, of course, want to keep running. They want to keep stealing bases. They were second in baseball in stolen bases. Terang with the 50 last year, and this is what the Brewers do. They got to keep running. They're going to keep running the base paths. So some big names off that coaching staff that are not coming back, but still they're replacing him with Bourbon here, and we'll see how he fits in. But his role, again, base running, outfield defense, very good, of course, for the Milwaukee Brewers. And bunting, which is kind of making a return to the Milwaukee Brewers as we know it. But we'll get to learn more about him as we get to spring training. All right, that's going to do it for Locked On Brewers. Brewers are here through 2050, and that's a good thing, obviously, for all of us. Not only at Locked On Brewers, but as Brewer fans as well. Stay positive. Stay positive. I am positive, but I'm going to continue to be upfront and objective with you and tell it like it is with the Milwaukee Brewers. You want that, don't you? We had the best manager in the game. I was just talking to, and I forget the fella's name, who runs Nico Euros. He was in love with Pat Murphy. We all should. His manager of the year should have been unanimous manager of the year. He wasn't. I had an episode on that coming down on whatever couple of writers that didn't vote for him. But we love him as our manager. And the Brewers do have some work to do between now and opening day. That's going to do it for me. Thanks for making your first listen to every day Locked On Brewers. For your second listen, take a listen to my guy Sully on Locked On MLB. He'll have all the hot stove talk all around baseball. My guy Sully on Locked On MLB. See you soon. Chuck Freeman, Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.